Climate change, as you know, has made India quite vulnerable. It has made India quite fearful. But paradoxically, climate change has also made India very strong. And it has given enough strength to articulate a very big vision for climate change mitigation. Well, let me explain this. I've had a ringside view of the proceedings of COP21, United Nations Framework Convention for Climate Change, in the year 2015, December, at Paris. Our India pavilion was abuzz. A whole bunch of international journalists, media was there, wanting to check and understand why India is so generous in articulating the International Solar Alliance, in spite of being a country that had perhaps the lowest per capita emissions. They were quite intrigued. They also wanted to know why we were not even acrimonious towards the Western countries that decided to completely pollute now and decided to clean up later. For instance, all of us know, like, over the decades, the West had really polluted. I wouldn't like to seriously blame them, but they were a part of this whole phenomenon of globalization, urbanization, industrialization, and motorization. They came as quadruplets. So the entire West industrialized, emitted, but they wanted to clean up later. So the media was pretty intrigued and asked us this question. You seem to be quite comfortable with your vision. At that time, we had our own answers. But today, thinking about it, I think there are two reasons. The first one is our legacy. The other one is our policy. Now, let me explain the legacy bit. It's very interesting. If you have seen what's happening in Sundarbans today, the big ecological asset that we have in West Bengal, the mangrove forests there are being very fiercely protected by 3,000 women. And these 3,000 women, my friends, are widows. How did they become widows? Because the tigers in the mangroves killed the men. They became widows. They were crippled emotionally, they were crippled physically, and even economically. But what was their reaction? They never showed any anger. They just continued to work, and even continue to work even today, protecting fiercely our ecological asset. That's just one example of the DNA that India has. The second one is about policy. I remember when we started working in the area of disruptive technologies. We were glorifying artificial intelligence, machine learning, cloud computing, etc. And if you really try to understand how AI is being deployed by other countries, look at China and America. AI is being used for military, for aggression. Look at Germany. AI is being used for bringing work-life balance. France, environmental protection. UAE, for creating jobs. And AI is being used in Japan to bring in efficiencies, because, as you know, Japan is for efficiency always. But look at India. We're using artificial intelligence and machine learning for simple things like bringing inclusion, agriculture, as Amaya was speaking, for agricultural productivity, to protect our farmers, to educate our girls. So this is our policy. So we have the legacy, and we also have the policy in place to articulate very big visions. For instance, in 2015, when Prime Minister very courageously announced the International Solar Alliance, in the year 2017, we announced the EV policy, electric vehicles policy. Now, as recently as COP26 in Glasgow, our Prime Minister announced the net zero vision for India in 2050. And the green hydrogen vision has just been rolled out. Now, how do you think we'll achieve all this? We cannot achieve all this unless the states cooperate and all states collaborate to make India move forward. Here, I'd like to really beg to differ with Aristotle, who said something like, the whole is bigger than the sum of its parts. In India, we are a union of states. The union is as big as the sum of its states. It's only when the states start looking at climate action with the same passion, with the same vision, are we going to achieve the climate vision of our Honorable Prime Minister. Our states have to look inside and start taking their vulnerability maps very seriously. Our states have to look at their reports like Higgs, hazards, infrastructure, governance, and social development reports very carefully. They have to institute studies. More importantly, they have to look at collaborations with all stakeholders concerned. Look at the private sector. All it needs is bring awareness. All it needs is talk to them, negotiate with them to align with your vision. Get women on board. Get women on board for the simple reason that in India, we came to know the statistic that might really startle you, impress you, and perhaps excite you is in India, we have the largest percentage of STEM graduates. STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Graduates are far higher in India than any other country. We're ahead of US, ahead of UK, ahead of France, ahead of Germany. These women are not trained to work in the area of climate science. Climate change mitigation is dependent on science. You have to pull them. The states can come out with an incentive. They can come out with policies. Now look at the startup ecosystem. India was never on the startup map. And today, we have 50,000 startups. And we also have 100 unicorns. These startups can be inspired to work in the area of climate change mitigation. The potential is so high, the opportunities are so huge. All states have to come together and work, and people like you, influencers like you, can really convince the states to do that. Now let me conclude by saying that in the year 2000, I don't know how many of you recall, almost 198 country heads, presidents, prime ministers of 198 countries came together and pledged to make Millennium Development Goals happen. What were the goals? The goals were so lofty. They were about poverty alleviation. They were about giving elementary education to children. They were about preventing maternal deaths. They were about stopping infant mortality. They were about not having women succumb to HIV and communicable diseases. The goals were about bringing gender equality. The goals were about environment protection. And the last goal was about global partnerships. Lofty goals. But if you see the results, the Millennium Development Goals have not been achieved by any country. You know the reason? Because they never had national policies. They never had a structure in place. They never had people like the climate group that works on capacity building, that works on garnering knowledge, sharing best practices, creating a compendium of knowledge. They never had that. So we failed. Soon after that happened, the SDGs were announced with aplomb. I hope that we'll be able to achieve the SDGs. And in this process, people like you are invaluable. You are the fraternity. You are extremely invaluable, just as the climate group is. So my best wishes and blessings for continuous support to India so that we realize the vision of net zero of the Honorable Prime Minister. Thank you.